everyone on the call today. On behalf of Chapter Zero Brussels and our friends from Climact, again, good afternoon. Assuming most of you are calling in from Europe or are based in the same time zone. If not, then it's maybe good afternoon to you. My name is Daniel Verbruggen. I'm member of the Board of Directors of Chapter Zero Brussels. And today I will be assisted by Vanessa van Bergen and also Bianca Reminders, who is our operator, if I can give you her a title, but they may help me during the Q&A session. So for those who don't know us that well, so Chapter Zero Brussels is part of the World Economic Forum's Climate Governance Initiative. We help board directors in Belgium and Luxembourg and in the European Union to build their understanding of climate change. So that enables them to play a proactive role in the boardroom in stewarding their company's climate transition strategies. We're also very active through engaging and learning on the topic of sustainability and ESG. Many thanks also to Climact today for organizing this webinar. We welcome back Jerome Meessen, who you may know from the first part of this series. And the first part was about the transition planning and for climate action and the role of the board. But in that session, we focused on the manufacturing sector, whereas today we will be focusing on the financial industry. Jerome is associate partner at Climact. Climact has been established around 2007 and has been empowering governments and organizations to act on climate change towards a sustainable zero carbon society. Currently, I believe the team consists of 50 plus consultants with an entrepreneurial culture. Jerome will be assisted by Pieter Jan van Eerdeweg today, who is energy and climate consultant from Climact. After Jerome's short presentation, which will last approximately 20 minutes, we'll have the pleasure of welcoming Vanessa Temple from ING. And we have two Vanessas on the call today. Vanessa has a long-standing career with ING, evolving from relationship management, debt capital markets, leverage finance, and wholesale business. And she evolved to climate risk and became ESG lead for ING Belgium. And she will be sharing some thoughts on the challenges incurred by financial institutions whilst going through the transition phase. So that will leave us at the end with roughly 20 minutes for Q&A and a panel discussion with Climact and our guests today. So before kicking off, some housekeeping points. This webinar will be recorded. By the way, part one about the manufacturing industry can still be viewed. So it's available on YouTube and on the respective websites of the organizations. A selection of slides will be provided to all the participants, and you will be on mute throughout this webinar. But please insert your questions on the Q&A function at the bottom of your page, and we'll address those questions at the end of Jerome's presentation and also the testimonial from ING from Vanessa Temple. So that's it. Thank you. So without further ado, Jerome, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Daniel. Let me share my screen. Is it okay with my screen? Everybody sees it? No, not yet. This should be okay, right?
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction. So today we again will focus a little bit on the specificities of the financial institutions in transition planning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So basically, there are 5 things I would like you to take away from this webinar. First, the transition plans are urgent because the science is clear and we know that we have to do it at least for scientific reasons. Next, of course, this is mandated. This is required by regulation and also financial institution specific regulations. But next to that, transition plans are basically a way to anticipate climate risks and opportunities, especially in the financial sector. But it is also requiring, it's demanding. It requires robustness, consistency, and it demands also board involvement and support from the management. We will discuss this in a moment. So in terms of scientific basis, you know that to commit to a Paris agreement to keep the global temperature well below 2 degrees, we need basically to halve our emissions every decade. Okay, 50% reduction of our absolute emissions every 10 years. This is basically the tempo we need to follow. And today, we already have a global warming of about 1.2 degrees experienced at global level, which raises plenty of physical threats and risks already. We will get back to that in a moment. So it means that there is no reason to wait. We know that the more we wait, the more we will pay. But transition plans are also required by regulation. So you know that we have a Paris Agreement at global level. The Paris Agreement has set some indicative temperature targets, but also indications that the financial flows should be consistent with the targets. Next to that, this is translated at EU level in the Green Deal. And the Green Deal is an unprecedented framework package of policies and initiatives, especially the Fit for 55% policy package, which in itself also has specific recommendation for the financial institutions. You know that to finance the transition, one of the key elements of the Green Deal is to improve transparency through the CSRD directive, for instance. And of course, this is all translated into national targets for specific sectors recommendations. Three key regulations that will play a role, or that are playing already a role for financial institutions, are first the CSDDD, which is a duty to act. So the CSDDD, contrarily to the CSRD, is not only about disclosing what you do, but also about disclosing your progress and showing that you are moving towards your target. And there may be penalties and fines associated to that. The CSRD, I guess most of you know, is for most of the large companies in the coming 3 years an obligation to disclose in a very complex format what companies are actually doing on ESG, but climate specifically. And next to that, there are also some sectorial specific regulations, and I take only a couple of them, like the Solvency and Capital Requirements Regulation, which basically requires financial institutions to anticipate the risk of climate change. We will get deep in a little bit what we mean with risk. So basically, there's a couple of regulations that are all supporting the idea of a credible, robust transition plan. And this has been repeated again recently by the ECB, which as part of its mission is also requiring the banks in Europe to anticipate this risk and to integrate climate risks in their risk management framework. So this is for the regulation. And of course, more broadly, transition plans are a way to anticipate risks and opportunities. So you know that when we talk about climate change risks, we actually talk about two types of risk. On one hand, we have the physical risks, like the floodings that we have experienced in Belgium, or drought dropping the yield rate of agriculture, stuff like that. And next to that, we also have the transition risks, which basically are the business impacts of ambitious climate policies. Because climate policies have implications in terms of technologies, shifting to electric vehicles, for instance, but also implications in terms of policies, a legal framework. We discussed this already, and the carbon pricing of the ETS, for instance, is often cited. There may be implications also in terms of reputation and also changes in the behavior of the market, your clients and consumers and the society at large. And so basically, these climate risks are materializing already today in the financial institutions, in all their different types of activities. In underwriting, for instance, this is of course materializing as increased claims costs. This is already very obvious in Europe and Belgium specifically. There are also changing risk profiles that needs to be taken into account. How to ensure electric vehicles or buses in the future, or hydrogen solutions. This is a key burning question. And then asset managers also see these risks today in terms of, for instance, uncertainty and market volatility on of the policies, but also the raising risk of losing partially or totally physical assets due to natural catastrophes. For the lending activities, also, of course, there is a clear risk of stranded assets, dropping collateral values, increased default rates in all types of lending, and also, as I mentioned, the increased capital requirements and so on and so on. And for other capital markets activities, here again, there are reputational risk, repricing risk, and many other ways of seeing this already, as repeated by many press releases over the last month. This is for the risk part, but of course there are some opportunities related to that. And I know in the article of Wunsch, the governor of the Belgian National Bank this morning, that he was kind of challenging a little bit this idea, but still with our clients, we see some reputation benefits of having a credible transition plan. Benefits in terms of improved reputation for your clients, for your stakeholders, improved also confidence of your investors and stakeholders. There are, of course, new opportunities. We will get back to that in a moment. But there are there is a lot of investing opportunities also for banks and so on. You also will improve your financial performance by through a better management of operational costs, energy bill, and so on. Of course, it's a way to anticipate regulatory and other transition risk, as I mentioned. So there is a balance to find between, of course, the challenging context of financial institutions today and seizing the opportunities, anticipating this risk. This is all what the transition plan is all about. Talking about opportunities, just a couple of figures. If you want to decarbonize Belgium, it will require about 35 billion investment a year. This is one of the outcomes of our modeling. But if you compare this to a business as usual investment in the energy system, let's say, it's an additional cost of about 2-3% of the GDP, which you need to compare to the potential 6% GDP drop in case we do not stick to 2% climate change. So here again, there are significant investment, which means an opportunity for investors, and still these investments are relatively low compared to the consequences of climate change. And also in terms of voluntary initiatives from financial institutions, we also see quite a lot of initiatives. Just to mention a couple of them, you may know the Net Zero Banking Alliance, gathering banks from all over the world. And these banks, in that context, have to set long-term targets to demonstrate commitment to support some sort of charter. Even though the Net Zero Banking Alliance doesn't require them to have deep calculation and to interim targets for the different asset classes. The Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance is, like the other one, also led by the UN, and is also providing guidances for asset owners to set targets and to develop transition plans. And here, in this case, there are some specific targets and calculation modalities for some asset classes like real estate, energy supply, and so on. And next to these alliances, you also have methodologies, standards like the PCAF standard or the science-based targets. The PCAF is a methodology for accounting the financed emissions, like how much ton of CO2 does your portfolio of lending emit, or your mortgage portfolio, while the science-based targets helps companies calculating targets that are credible enough to claim that you're 1.5 aligned or aligned with the Paris Agreement. So these methods, these alliances are additional incentives to develop a credible transition plan. So climate change, the science, the regulation, of course, risks, opportunities, and stakeholders' concerns. These all these are actually the key drivers of developing transition plans. Now, what is a transition plan? It's not just a commitment, a vague commitment. It requires robustness and consistency, coherence. Basically, there are three core elements of a transition plan. That's true for other industries. That's true also for financial industries. The first core element are the targets. You need targets, ideally, that are 1.5 aligned, or at least if you want to tick that box in the CSRD or to tell the CSDD that you're 1.5 aligned. Next to the target, you need an action plan. Action plan, responsibilities, a phasing. We will develop each of these components in a second. But next to that, next to the targets and the action plan, you also need an accountability framework. You need to make sure that these action plan will be implemented, and the role of the board, the role of the executive committees here is critical. So deep diving a little bit on one of each of these elements, the targets. Here again, for financial institutions are pretty specific. First, they are looking at the long-term objective. You need to have the long-term direction, typically by 2050, looking at net zero with a clear understanding of what net zero means. This will help you having the long-term headline and pole star for the entire organization and the long-term change that is needed. But next to that long-term objective, you need also interim targets, both on your portfolio in general, but also for some specific sectors. So the portfolio alignment will have as implication, as consequence, that your commitment will ripple down, will have a cascading effect in the real economy, with your clients incentivized to themselves be more resilient against climate risks, but also as an investor, you may incentivize the development of climate-friendly solutions, let's say taxonomy-aligned solutions. And of course, for some sectors, there are specific recommendations, typically energy supply, renewables, or real estate, where the policies in the different countries are very clear already. And as financial institutions, it's important to have, as part of your targets, specific targets for these components, these sectors. The idea is to guide the transition flows, the financial flows towards them. Now, talking about the action plan, there are basically two sides of the action plan. On one hand, you need to make sure that you implement the required solutions to reach your targets. So it means developing new products and finance solutions, green bonds and so on. Next, you need to make sure that you integrate these targets in your decision-making processes and procedures. For private equity, this could be due diligence processes, or this could be also credit risk criteria or credit criteria in general. And we also see, by working with ESG rating agencies, that this is really being more and more integrated. And of course, part of the implementation is also to make sure that all your processes, your policies, your strategies internally are aligned with your climate objective. This is also something you may need to disclose at some point when elaborating about your transition plan. But of course, financial institutions are not playing alone in a vacuum. They have to take the client and the peers concerned into account. So it's essential in a transition plan to engage with the clients and the portfolio at large, to create a customized client journey, typically raising awareness and maybe also monitoring, getting data from them. We know that the data challenge is huge today, to both account the footprint, but also to drive the transition. That's why also collaborating with the industry peers is essential, or with data providers, and also, of course, with regulation bodies in general. So remember that the action plan itself is composed of specific components that are essential pieces, and it's difficult to have a robust transition plan while omitting one of these components. And next, there is the accountability framework. Accountability, I don't have the time to deep dive in all the text here, but basically it's about making sure that you create the incentives, you align with your strategies, and you can monitor and pilot, let's say, the transition. So it means that the leadership must be accountable. There must be clear roles. There must be incentives also to make sure that both the board, the executive committee, and the top management in general are aligned with the targets. Of course, you need metrics, and metrics needs first data, and we know that it's a key problem for the financial institutions today. But once you have the data, you can build the metrics, you can build the monitoring dashboards to make sure that you can follow and know where you are. But accountability also means the skills and the culture of the company. A transition plan requires training, change management, to make sure that all the team and all your colleagues can progressively be embarked in the journey. And of course, there is a key requirement, which is the full alignment of the different strategies and the different goals to make sure that nothing is contradictory here. So it means that for each of these components, there are specific challenges, and I think I've been mentioning them already. But it means also that the board or the executive committees have a role to play in each of these components, making sure, for instance, that the targets are clearly understood, and that there are public statements and so on aligned with the targets. Also, in making sure that the action plan is integrated in other transformation plans of the company. And of course, in terms of accountability, the board has, and it's part of its critical role, making sure that the executive committees are accountable for this, and that they will do the job through monitoring and taking the right decisions at the right time. Of course, there are plenty of guidances, standards, and so on to support you. Most of the information we provided you with today are based on these information, and I don't have, of course, the time to go through it. Just to recap, so you understood that transition plans are urgent. They are required by the regulation, and especially by a specific financial regulation. It's a way to anticipate risk and opportunities, the balance of both being sometimes to something uncertain, but it requires also essential core elements. And next to that, the board has to play a role. It has to play a role first in elaborating, designing the plan. It has to play a role at different stages of the plan, the transition plan. First, at the upfront of that, by being aware of the reason why it's needed, by engaging the executive committees. Then, of course, there will be a phase of design where the teams need to be deeply involved, and I'm sure Vanessa will talk about this. It's impossible to have a consistent plan without clearly engaging the colleagues and most of the departments have to be engaged. And of course, once the design is done, the board and the exco have a role to make sure that this actually happens. I think I mentioned it already. So 4 messages that basically you could take on top of what I have said for boards specifically. First, make sure that you're sufficiently aware of the reason, the risks, the opportunities, and the transition status. Typically for our clients in the sector, we recommend 1 training each year because things are evolving so fast, and we can see it after the EU elections, or probably after the US elections. You know that things are evolving quite fast, and it's important to stay up to date. Next, number 2, the board has a role also in terms of inspiring and challenging the executives. The transition plan is a living thing. Your transition plan today will not stay like that. It will evolve over time. And it's important that the board plays a role also in continuously challenging the teams on this. The consistency, the coherence, this is a major barrier for some of the transition plan. If there is no consistency, it will not help your company. It will just be a ticking the box exercise. It will be heavy, and it will be more a burden rather than an opportunity. And next, of course, as I told you again, it's essential to remember that we need to adapt, to monitor, to improve your data over time, so you can take the right reorientation decisions when required. So this was in a short why and how we recommend to tackle transition plans for financial institutions. You know that the transition plans make your wish a reality, if I may end with these quotes. So I thank you very much. I will now hand over to Vanessa from ING Belgium. Vanessa, I stopped sharing my screen. The floor is yours, and you know that we will have Q&A time after Vanessa's intervention.
So hello everyone, I'm Vanessa Temple. Sharing this, please tell me, it's not in presentation mode, I think, right?
Not yet, no.
Is that okay now?
Perfect.
Okay, lovely. So hi, I'm Vanessa from ING Belgium. I'm ESG Lead, and I've been in that position since April 2022. My presentation will focus essentially on what happens at ING Group level rather than ING Belgium, because more of this is disclosed and publicly available, and I thought it was more interesting for the audience to be as concrete as possible, particularly since we have just published a few weeks ago in September the latest climate progress update from ING Group level. So I took some pieces of that report, which you can find on ing.com, or if you Google ING Climate Progress Update 2024, you will see it. So I'll focus on kind of strategy, and particularly the sustainability pillar. And I will have a strong focus on climate as well, especially since this webinar is about transition planning. And also climate is, at least for the moment, the biggest focus of our sustainability strategy. It doesn't mean, as shown in this slide, that we only do that. And then I'll share with you some challenges and some interesting themes I think you should take with you in your board conversations, or if you're not a board member but you feed board members, maybe it's interesting to keep in mind these themes, particularly in times of strategy days or in times of budgets and strategy updates and so on. So if we look at ING Group strategy, growing the difference with two strategic pillars. The first one is customer experience, and the second one is sustainability at the heart. So at the heart means, and this is, I'm just going to repeat and corroborate what Climact just shared. It's really a transversal topic. So we want to build a sustainable future for all our stakeholders, our employees, our company, but also our customers and society in general. And clearly the recent trends show that we need to accelerate on this. Our role is clearly to finance the transition. This is the role of the finance sector, be it banks, pension funds, insurance companies, asset managers, whatever. We need to steer capital flows towards financing the transition. I hope I am not teaching you anything by sharing this. And the second, obviously, big role is to engage with our clients. Again, repeating what Jerome just shared. We also have the S, which is applicable to the banking world and to ING in particular. And there the pillar is on financial health. And to that end, we have actually made some commitments under the UNEP-FI, United Nations Environmental Programme for Financial Institutions. So this, I'm not going to focus on this, but if you're interested, we have more on ing.com again. But I didn't want to ignore the fact that we also have some actions on the S side, S from the ESG. I guess you're with me on this one. And of course, and this is an important role for banks as well, is to keep our banks safe and secure, and which means also the data of our clients and the money of our clients safe and secure. Now, as I said, I was going to focus on our climate ambition, right? So we really want to be a leader and to play a leading role in accelerating that transition to a low carbon economy. So what needs to happen to that end? On one hand, greenhouse gas emissions need to be brought down. They need to go to net zero by 2050. We need, obviously, to ensure that we build and we support the building of a sustainable future, and we want to do that in the most inclusive way. So what does that mean for a bank and for ING in particular, and what is our role in that global transition and in these three particular set of actions? In terms of bringing greenhouse gas emissions down, it means we need to support businesses and our clients, most importantly, in the transition to net zero. And maybe coming back to the transition plan fact here, I understand most of the audience is from financial institutions, but for those who are not, if you look at the carbon footprint of a bank, and for ING more specifically, and again, this is disclosed, so you can find the details on this. If you look at our scope 1 and 2, so what we call our operational footprints, this represents less than 1% of the total scope 1, 2, and 3. More than 99% of our estimated greenhouse gas emissions is located in our lending book. So this is very important, and this means this is where we have impact. So if we want to decarbonize, if we want to transition to net zero, that means we need to support our clients in transitioning their own economic activities that we finance and the assets that we finance. It could be assets from business clients, and it can be assets, obviously, from retail clients. And more specifically, ING is very much exposed to the mortgage markets. Just to give you some ideas, at group level, the 23 figures is that our loan portfolio is about 650 billion, of which more than 300 is in mortgage exposure, and we're active in the mortgage markets in more than 10, I think it's 11 countries, if I remember correctly. And to give you the Belgian figures, balance sheets size is about 120 billion euros, of which we have 40 billion exposure to the mortgage market, which is split between ING Belgium and Record Credits, one of our subsidiaries. So that gives you an idea that this is material, obviously, from a exposure perspective, but also from a greenhouse gas emission perspective. Anyway, so we need to support all these clients in bringing this down to zero, and that means also that we need to sharpen our client engagement to make sure that we can accompany them not only with financing but also with advisory and with sharing knowledge to make sure that their activities and assets are decarbonized. In terms of building up the sustainable future, what does that mean? It's to finance the technologies, the infrastructure, and the solutions which are needed in a decarbonized society. So to that end, to give you an example, ING has committed to grow financing of renewables to 7.5 billion per annum by 2025. So that means we're going to more than triple our commitment to that particular sector. Next to that, we are financing, and we intend to do more of this, batteries, for instance, or we just closed a transaction for the first new green steel plant in Scandinavia. So those are the new technologies, and it's a challenge for us. We need to learn about those new technologies and gain expertise about these new technologies to make sure we can include them in our risk appetite. And then on the third one is to find new ways to involve and to help individuals to be involved and to play their role in the transition. And so, as I explained earlier, homes is obviously, or housing financing is a very important role. And so we need to help our clients and to incentivize them to acquire sustainable homes or to retrofit their homes. And this is obviously a big challenge, particularly in Belgium, where the regulatory framework is not, let's call it, is not really incentivizing people to do so and homeowners to do so. And particularly, there were some measures taken lately, but which have been, many of them have been removed, as you know. Several enablers. I won't spend too much time on this. Next to governance, but Jerome has shared on this, we need to manage our risks. This is not only recognize that ESG factors drive material risks to our balance sheet. We've done stress tests on our balance sheets under various climate scenarios, physical risks and transition risks, and they came out as material. But also next to that, it is a regulatory obligation to embed ESG factors in our risk management practices, right? So we are a systemic bank in Belgium, but also in various other countries such as the Netherlands, and we are systemic also at European level, and so we are among the first banks to be checked, I would say, by the ECB on how we embed their expectation in our risk management practices. Obviously, we need to train our people so they can accompany their clients to do so across the various business lines. We need to reach net zero in our own operations, even though it's meaningless from an impact perspective compared to what we can do with our lending book. We still have to do so. We need to role model ourselves before asking our clients to decarbonize their own assets, right? This is just a question of walking the talk. We need to have proper tooling and data to help us manage our risks and steer our loan book towards net zero, but also to some tooling to accompany our clients, to help them in making decisions, for instance, to renovate their house or their building. So we have a tool to that end that is available for our SME clients and retail clients, for instance. We need, as a bank, and especially as a large institution, it is expected from us that we collaborate and that we work towards standard setting. And for instance, and I will explain that a bit later, we are partnering with other banks, with industry experts to develop methodologies and metrics for the decarbonization of certain strategic and highly carbonated sectors that we invest in and that we finance. So the idea is really, and you will see, I will speak about our Terra approach on this, which is a toolbox of methodologies and pathways we have defined and that we measure each year and that we steer under for the various sectors we are exposed to. And of course, advocacy. This is a big element. We need to share our thoughts and our recommendations with governance, with industry federations at European level to push for help and to help clients, sectors, individuals to decarbonize. Some latest developments, I won't go into all the details, but maybe what is more interesting, it's in terms of the Terra approach. So some of you may be familiar with this. What is the Terra approach? Something that we have for the first time disclosed on in 2018, and it was further to the decision from ING to endorse the Paris Agreement, to try and aim to be well below 2 degrees by 2050 in order to limit, to go to net zero by 2050 in order to limit global warming to hopefully 1.5 degrees by the end of the century. And so we started in 2018 by developing 5 decarbonization pathways for 5 of the carbonated and strategic sectors for us. As I explained earlier, we did that through collaborating with other banks and with industry experts and with some NGOs. For instance, we work quite a lot with RMI, Rocky Mountain Institute, which is a climate finance specialized NGO in Washington, D.C. Over time, this has evolved, and now we have 12 sectors, and we just recently added 2, aluminium and dairy products. And we also update regularly those decarbonization pathways and the targets, which are the long-term ones in 2050, sometimes earlier. Some of them for 2 sectors, we have targets to net zero by 2040, and we have interim targets as well. We steer our loan portfolio essentially on emission intensity rather than absolute emissions. And this is the case of certainly many banks. And it's a big topic of conversation with the EFRAG which is the producer of the ESRS standards under the CSRD. And I know quite some banks are involved in those conversations. And for instance, BNP is certainly a bank we partner with in our conversations with regulators and standard setters to that end. I'll show you afterwards where we stand on those various portfolios. So, but it's important to understand that we not only measure our portfolio every year, we also, and in an increasingly strong way, we actually steer. And we used to do it, we steer our portfolios and our clients, but we used to do it essentially at portfolio levels. But now we really sharpened our client engagement in order to do the steering at individual clients level. Now, this is, and it's very important. I'm going to spend some time on this now. The focus and those 2,000 clients, which are mentioned on the left-hand side of this slide, is for large clients. This is what we call our wholesale bank division. So those are essentially listed large corporates and financial institutions, right? So what we're doing now in 2023, we started collecting in a tool, a platform that we have created, which is called ESGX. We have started collecting everything that is publicly available in terms of ESG data with respect to governance, with respect to transition plans, targets. Is it science-based? Yes or no? Is there budget behind this? Yes or no? Are there concrete actions behind this? Yes or no? For our large customers. So those 2,000 clients, which are in scope of the Terra approach, and also among our clients, which are the biggest ones. We call them the gold and platinum clients, which is our segmentation for the largest clients we have globally, right? This is not, I'm not talking about Belgium here. This is, again, a global talk. So we have collected this data in 2023, and what we're doing now in 2024, and we have a target to reach 90% client conversations among those 2,000 to discuss those client transition plans with the client. So the idea is to fine-tune our understanding of the data we have collected, to complete the information if it is not complete, and to also share insights with their clients. Because obviously, if we have, say, 50 clients from one particular sector, we can share insights on a no-name basis, obviously, towards how we compare that particular client with his or her sector and with his peers. Also, what we've done with those client transition plans, we have scored them with our own scoring internal system, and we explain to them, we share that with the client, how we score them, and you know, what could be potentially improved, for instance. And so what we plan to do for the next couple of years for those large clients is to keep that approach. So we're going to update the data with more disclosures from the clients. And it can be disclosures from the clients, but it can also be data available on CDP, for instance, right? We also use ESG data platforms to that end. And we're going to keep updating this data, and we're going to track the progress of the clients under those targets and transition plans. And we will see, obviously, how they score and how they perform under these plans. And this will obviously, we have a decision tree which has been created. This is all disclosed in the climate progress update if you're interested, and how we will eventually, if need be, reconsider the relationship if this doesn't go according to plan. Obviously, we want to work more and more with clients which are aligned with our own climate objectives. Now, again, and important to mention, particularly in the Belgian context, Belgium is essentially, if you look at the corporate landscape, and again, I'm not teaching you anything here, is essentially a SME and mid-corporate landscape. And so we need to make, the approach I've just described is really for very large corporates. For smaller ones, we need to take into account their readiness and how much resources they have available to start tackling this. So it's completely different to speak to a certain Unilever or a more family-owned business with, I don't know, 100 FTEs or less than that, right? So they need more time, they need more support from their bankers and from their investors in order to help them taking that journey. And so this approach, and I insist on this because there were some titles in the press which were taken from the Financial Times interview of our CEO, Steven van Rijswijk. But it's important to understand this is essentially for the large clients at this stage and is not applicable yet to smaller companies, which need more time and more help from us and from others. Right, I guess I'm not good on timing, just sharing this screen. So these are the 12 sectors I have described to you, which are in scope of our Terra approach for the moment. So, and this is disclosed. We disclose that every year. Where we stand, you see the pathway that we have chosen for each of those sectors. You have also the metric of what is measured compared to that exposure we have in that sector. And you see where we stand. And sometimes you also have the data on where the market stands. So obviously, we're not going to spend too much time on this, but as you can see from the sectors, those are the most carbonated sectors. Let's talk about steel, cement, shipping, and so on. And then you have two very important ones in terms of real estate, commercial real estate, and residential one. Important for us as bank. I just gave you some figures on this. But if you look at the Belgian banks, at least the large ones, all of them are very exposed to real estate, residential, and commercial. Yeah, this one I can skip. Yeah, maybe this one. Maybe, I don't know, chapter 0 people. Can I still have 5 minutes or am I taking too long?
No, it's okay.
Okay, thanks. So this is, again, and if you need more information on those themes, it's available in our climate progress update as well. But I thought they were interesting themes for you to take along in your board conversations, right? So the growing sense of urgency, we're not there yet. We're not on the right track to limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees, as you all know. I'm perhaps stating the obvious here, and how can we evidence this is just the example of growing number of violent weather events, and which are growing not only in frequency but also in intensity, and not necessarily far from home, right? So this is obviously a key element, and so we do have a role and a duty as financial institutions to accelerate the transition through our financing and through our client engagement. Another theme which is important is that there's enhanced scrutiny of anything which is related to sustainability. We are being checked. We're being checked by regulators. We're being checked by NGOs, and obviously ING is one of their preferred targets. Obviously, the bigger you are, the more chances you have of being attacked, because it obviously has impact when you bring a large institution to the press more than the smaller ones. Okay, so this is just a question of drawing attention. And this is a legacy that the banking sector carries. It's about our image, and it's also creating skepticisms on behalf, I would say, of the public on our own sustainability promises. So this is something we need to deal with, and we need to keep in mind, and we need to be very careful in our communication. And at the same time, it's important that we keep communicating, because we strongly believe at ING in the emulation effect, and in setting the tone, in pushing not only our clients but also our industry to go that way. More and more, there's a need in order to really have impact, is to think about transition as a systemic change. And so this is, we've done a pilot actually in 2 sectors, in shipping and in commercial real estate. Again, we disclose about this in our climate progress update. So we've looked at, with an external consultant, we've looked at this. How can we really trigger action from a particular sector? How can we trigger action, concrete actions, and impact on the value chain. So, and which person should we partner, or bodies should we partner with? Who should we engage with in order to create that systemic impact? And then, of course, and this one, it really breaks my heart, but it's the polarization around the ESG debate. This is initially coming from America, but it's now very present in Belgium and in Europe. And we feel it's obviously quite strongly in Belgium for the moment. It's, the backing off from ESG topics, anti-woke capitalism, backlash on ESG themes, and so on. And so we need to take this into account, and we need also to make sure that we bring the right story, we bring the right narrative to our clients and to our governments, to our decision makers about the opportunities. And Jerome has mentioned this. This is a business imperative. And again, I'm stating the obvious, but I think it helps that we repeat this and that we use the right language for this. And of course, everyone chooses the way to express this. But this is a huge opportunity to be future-proof and to create resilience in a business model. So this is something that we need to bring to the conversations with clients, but also our own business model, to make sure that we keep sustainability at the heart of what we do and of our strategies. Some key challenges. This is more my personal input, I would say. So you won't find this in our disclosures, but I'm ESG lead for a subsidiary. So I'm very much into operationalization of sustainability into what we do, right? So we have adapted the strategy for the Belgian market and our positioning in the Belgian market and what kind of client footprint we have. But I wanted to share with you, what are the challenges we face. Obviously, ESG data, everyone knows about this, availability, quality, but you also need to create the controls and the flows of data and automate as much as possible with the reporting requirements that we have. And access to ESG resources, having the right people, the right knowledge is not easy, and we all fight for those resources. On one hand, regulatory complexity. Jerome has discussed this a bit, but at the same time, the lack of regulation to really implement this. So again, let's take the housing market in Belgium. How are we going to get to net zero in the housing market and decarbonize a housing stock in Belgium without supporting regulation and incentives for our clients? This is ESG, or sustainability, is highly transversal, so it requires from people like me, for instance, a lot of coordination to make sure that we break the silos, which often happen in large organizations, and that people work together, and that we do this in a concerted and collaborative way. Obviously, sustainability creates dilemmas, and the most obvious one is long-term sustainability versus short-term profitability, right? But at the same time, and this I'm going to quote Hans de Muncke, our CFO in Belgium, and he once told me, Vanessa, it's sustainability has to create dilemmas. It should create tensions. This is transformational, and it is not easy. And so we should not be discouraged by the fact that we have lows. And I feel for the moment we're in a low cycle in terms of sustainability. You just read the press, right? But it's okay. We still need to build and strengthen the foundations on this and work on the regulatory agenda, which is huge for banks. But this is just to help us having impact going forward. Just transition. This is where you meet the E meets the S. Leaves no one behind. Very difficult, again, the housing market, how to decarbonize if you can't afford to retrofit your house. And it doesn't mean that the banks can accept the risk on their balance sheet of someone who cannot repay the financing of the retrofitting of his house or her house retrofitting. Sometimes also for regulatory reasons, we can't even accept such risk on our balance sheet. So we need to find ways and partner with other finance partners, with the authorities, with public funds, in order to make sure we find a solution for this, and that, energy performance houses are not only for those who can afford this. Social inclusion, I think this CSRD reports are going to be quite interesting to read going forward on how this topic, which is about S4, notably S4 communities and end users of products. And one of the subtopics is on social inclusion and how is that going to be treated? Will it be considered material by financial institutions, and hence what is going to happen from that end? But accessibility of financial services is a key topic, for instance. And then, of course, we speak a lot about climate, but what about nature or biodiversity and human rights? And we have identified 3 key sectors where nature is critical, and so more and more we're going to start collecting data on this as well and embed that in our decision-making processes, which we already do with climate. Again, I'm talking here about the large wholesale clients, but this is clearly an area where data is lacking. Voilà, I'm done on this one, sharing our little disclaimer here, and happy to address questions if I'm able to answer them.
Yes, thanks so much, Vanessa. This was very insightful, and also Jerome's presentation. Yeah, time is moving fast as always. When you're having fun, I suppose. We have some questions here in the Q&A from the audience, and some interesting ones. The first one was about, it's more a legal question, I assume, but it's about a litigation risk. Should it be considered as a transition risk? And linked to that, how is it calculated? Can you calculate the potential cost of the lawsuits and I guess the damage compensations? I think that's more a question for Jerome.
Yes, indeed. So lawsuits and so on are part of the typical transition risks. Of course, it's difficult to anticipate the costs. So you can only do it a posteriori based on other lawsuits and or from benchmarking and so on. But the idea is indeed to anticipate the cost of entering this law, maybe losing some revenues, maybe losing some clients, maybe losing access to some market shares and so on and so on. But yes, theoretically, it's part of the transition risk. And by the way, just an observation over the last months or last year, let's say, we've seen lots of reputational risks actually becoming actual legal risks, where in the past NGOs used to just to protest and so on and damage the reputation. Today, sometimes it's becoming a legal, actual legal risk. Maybe Vanessa want to comment on this.
Yeah, so indeed, it's clearly a risk identified. How exactly is it calculated? To be honest, I don't know, but certainly what is always interesting is to look at previous cases in the markets, in the banking sector or in other sectors. We for the moment we are threatened at ING, and it's everything is on our website, and when I speak about it, it's ing.com rather than ing.be. You'll find much more information on that one, because this is all happening at global level. But we're threatened by Milieudefensie, which is the Dutch part of Friends of the Earth, to sue us on fossil fuel financing. But there's no lawsuit for the moment. It may come, right? But I'm being here completely transparent. Again, this is all publicly disclosed. But we do have very strong fossil fuel policies and actions, and we have recently announced new actions to decarbonize our energy portfolio and to make sure that our energy policy and financing policy goes in the direction of the decarbonization. And for that, we use essentially the scenarios of the International Energy Agency.
And just maybe to complement, so lawsuits used to be for carbon-intensive sectors like oil and gas or aviation, but we observe also that financial institutions, especially large banks, are also on the radar of such lawsuits. Indeed. Hope this answers the question.
Okay, thanks, Jerome and Vanessa. Maybe a quickie for Vanessa Temple. Would you know, and I don't know if you can disclose that, but the percentage of the loan book that ING has been able to transform or has been working on? And I refer to the 2,000 questions you had mentioned earlier.
I see that. So the 2,000 clients, I'm not sure I have the loan book emissions for those specific top 2,000 clients, but what I can tell you is that with our Terra approach, we cover about 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions associated to our loan book. Now, again, it's important to understand that when we calculate and we disclose financed emissions linked to our loan book, this is the scopes 1 and 2 of our counterparties. And we, for the first time in this climate progress update we published in September, we have started disclosing scope 3 emissions of our counterparties. Just to give you some numbers, scope 1 and 2 is 57 million tons of CO2 equivalents. And we cover most of the loan book, as I just said. On scope 3, and there we cover only, I think, 22% of the millions, of the billions we finance. This is already, I don't know, like 250 million tons or something like that. It's huge. But again, scope 3 emissions, it's you have a lot of double counting, right? So it's important to see them separately. But it will not surprise you because most industries have most of their emissions in their scope 3. But that being said, there is obligation under Pillar 3 requirements, if I'm correct, which is specific for banks under the EBA, European Banking Authority, to disclose also scope 3 of our counterparties in the most carbonated sectors. But okay, to reply to your question, sectors in scope of Terra, that's about 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions associated to our loan book, if we take into account scope 1 and 2 of our counterparties. So that's the complete answer.
No, thanks for that, Vanessa. That's a very clear answer and more than what we expected, I think. But that's very good. And clearly, ING has done a great work there. If I compare that with other banks, I'm looking at time here. Yes, I'm afraid we'll have to close now. If there are still some remaining questions, feel free to contact Chapter 0 Brussels or Climact. And if there are questions for ING, we'll funnel those through to Vanessa Temple. So rest me to thank our speakers today, the guests and my colleagues, and of course all of you, without whom this webinar would not have been possible. I sincerely hope you enjoy the content, and we also hope to see you next time around. So I would say goodbye until next time. Bye-bye now.